Maybe I'm crazy, maybe I'm not.
All right, very excited to have Joran Palmer on the Maybe I'm Crazy podcast. Thanks so much for joining us. You're a Fox family member and on the herd with us a bunch, but I'm glad you're doing well. How is everything in quarantine?
It's different. I should be on the field a lot more than I am right now, but instead I'm in a studio shooting content. Either way, figuring out a way to coach guys. And I definitely will say I got two little boys at home, so in some ways this has been great to kick it and go on adventures and all that stuff and have time to decompress. So
how is the training? Have you been able to do any on-field training at all?
Limited. So I'm supposed to have a lot of NFL vets out here right now. Obviously a lot of guys canceled trips last second, and I'm supposed to be having camps, my QB Summit camps, which is from 6th grade to seniors in high school, with college counselors and most of them NFL counselors as well. So those are obviously canceled. I'm not having big group gatherings. But a couple of my vets that are in town, we're finding ways to work out with very small groups, whether it be on the beach or a kid's soccer field. It's funny, I live in Orange County, Southern California. I've got some buddies in the skateboarding industry, and a lot of my workouts with NFL starting quarterbacks right now feel a lot like the stories about how skateboarders film videos, where like they're skating until the security guard kicks them off. Like I feel like I'm having like NFL workouts right now until the security dude comes and says, beat it. So it's something to laugh about. And, with so much uncertainty about when these guys are going to actually get back to work, I don't think there's a ton of pressure for these dudes to be throwing 4 or 5 days a week. I think they've got time. Spending a lot of time with arm care, working on, more mobility stuff in their bodies as opposed to just throwing timing routes to guys down the field. So there's stuff to do. There's work to be done. It's just being creative and improvising a little bit.
So for anyone who doesn't know exactly what you do, because you kind of become like the quarterback Yoda a little bit. So what exactly do you do with guys, and how did you get into this? It's your company's quarterback or QB Summit.
Yeah. It started with me as I grew up around really kind of like the godfather of training quarterbacks. And his name is Bob Johnson. His son Rob played like 11 years in the league. People know Rob Johnson, played in Buffalo and Jacksonville. But Bob was my high school coach. My brother Carson is 5 years older than me, and Carson started training with Bob when he was in 7th grade. So I was a little guy. Bob created the Elite 11, which for those who don't know is a program for the top seniors in high school, and call it conservatively 80% of the quarterbacks in the NFL went through it on any given year. And they started that, and it's been around 23 years. I've been at every single one. I was like a little 6th grader shagging balls and filling up water cups. So I was around that my whole life. When I was playing in the league, I played 7 years. I would run the regionals for that around the country. And then when I was in high school, Bob trained guys for the draft. So I'd get out of school at lunch, I'd go down to the field, and I'd be running routes and catching balls for Joey Harrington and Kurt Kittner. And so I've been around draft training. I'd sit in the meetings. I'd skip my 6th period photo class, and I'd sit in draft training. And then when I was playing in the league during draft training, I wasn't throwing balls in January, but I'd kind of go run routes because it was a good way to stay in shape. And also look at wideouts and tight ends and be like, ooh, I like this guy, I like that guy. So I've just always been around draft training, and I've always been around development of quarterbacks. Now, I played a long time too, but I'm not doing what I'm doing now because I played. I'm doing it because I've been around the development side. So I've coached, the 10,000 hour rule. I've had that a long time ago. And I think the biggest thing for me is I realized at an early age that I can explain this better than I could do it. And I wish I could do it better. My brother's bank account is like completely different than mine. He could do it really well. And my thing is explaining it. So I just love pouring into guys. I work with kids from 6th grade through their senior year in high school. I've trained a lot of the top quarterbacks for the last few years for the draft. And I'm on pace here, probably through next year. A third of the starters in the NFL will be guys that have gone through my program.
Yeah, Elite 11 has really changed. It's changed the league. I think it's kind of innovated how everyone kind of evaluates quarterbacks and a lot of the positions going into college and into the league now. Also, like the relationships that you must make with these guys and just around the game of football are probably incredible.
Yeah, I mean I was looking the other day, somebody wants to buy a house. I'm going through it, talking through, because I remodeled 2 houses now. This is about what it costs to demo. That's like a client of mine. We're like looking at houses together. You know what I mean? So there's a lot of ways where I get to show up, and that's why, like people, with a lot of guys who do what I do, QB whisperer, QB guru, QB, all these different things. Like I'm just a consultant, but the reality is I'm kind of like the older vet in the room. So I think if you grab like 100 quarterbacks and probably any position, and you ask those guys, where'd you learn the most from? They'd all probably reference an older player before they'd reference a coach, right? Like Carson would say John Kitna, right? And I would say Carson before I would say Mark Trestman or Ken Zampese, two guys that coached me. And so I just think it's really common, like, because the vets, if they're older and they know their stuff, like they know more than you and they can share it with you, but they also completely understand who they're talking to and how to explain it. And so for me, I'm really just kind of like the older vet in the room. And so a lot of stuff comes up in conversations, and that's my favorite part, is not even just the mechanics side of things, the life side of things. Family, drama, girls, housing, money. Like I love weighing in on that stuff because I may not have necessarily experienced it, but I always say, like, I either got an answer for you, or I can get you an answer, or I can connect you with somebody who's got a great answer.
So to you, what really makes a great NFL quarterback? Not a good NFL quarterback. There's lots of good NFL quarterbacks. What makes a great one?
My eye goes to two things. In terms of the draft, evaluating, because I'll answer it differently. In terms of evaluating the great quarterback versus the good quarterback, it's two things. It's confidence and maturity. Now, confidence does not mean, and it's written behind me because I'm literally shooting content. I'm about to drop a ton of content on QBSummit.com. I'm kind of pivoting my whole business right now to being a subscription-based rad platform where everyone can learn. And so I'm literally shooting a piece of content on confidence. And so this is a great break. And confidence is the most important trait. Because let's say that a guy goes and has the best offseason ever, as if that's a thing, right? Like outworked everybody this offseason. That doesn't mean anything when the season starts. Like that doesn't mean that they spot you 7 points or you get to start off the game with a touchdown, right? What it means is that you have hopefully developed enough confidence through all those reps and all that work to be able to make those throws and make those plays in the game. So really the root of all the decisions guys make, I think, stem from confidence. And so, but confidence is not hereditary or God-given. I believe that it's a muscle that you can develop. And it's a muscle that if not worked on and not poured into correctly, it can atrophy and it can become irrelevant. It can go away too. And there's levels to it. There's confidence, but there's two kinds of confidence. There's unwavering self-generated confidence, meaning like, it doesn't matter what anybody says. I believe this about myself. I don't need it. It's independent of the environment. We're good. We're bad. Everybody thinks I'm the man. Everybody thinks I suck. It doesn't matter. This is what I believe about myself, right? And then there's reactionary confidence, which really is just like, it's completely dependent on the environment. If everybody says I'm the man, shoot, they might be right. If everybody says I'm a bum, I start going, are they right? Am I a bum? So confidence is the most important trait. And you look at Joe Burrow. I haven't been around one more confident than that. Deshaun is the closest thing. I trained Deshaun Watson for the draft, worked with him for a long time. Like that's the closest thing. But there's such different personalities, and their confidence comes from such different things that it's hard for me to even compare them. The second thing is maturity, and then maturity is not tucking in your shirt and being on time and having manners. Maturity is handling new crazy situations as if you've been through them before. So again, Joe Burrow. The craziness of last year, like completely life-changing in really like 3 or 4 months. And the way that he's handled the whole process, I go, look, that's not my opinion. That's a fact. This dude's mature.
So how do you, because to me, I subscribe to everything that you say. I don't believe fundamentally that you can be great at anything without a somewhat I don't want to say God-like level of confidence, but you have to have a certain level of confidence and belief in yourself that you can accomplish something that very few people in the world can accomplish or will ever accomplish. So I don't have a problem with athletes being confident because that's how you become successful to me. But there's a somewhat of a public opinion that you're supposed to be like extremely humble or have some sort of contrition when you're dealing with like the media or anything else, which I don't personally believe, but I think we can both agree that's a consensus amongst the public. So what's the difference between confidence and cocky, I guess, or what someone would consider an overconfident or cocky or arrogant athlete? What's the line there?
Well, I just think the common denominator, or the thing that separates those things, is insecurity. Now, you've been around a lot of superstar athletes in a lot of different sports, as have I. But the ones that I've been around and played with some of them, the super famous, super cocky guys, they're super insecure. I'm not going to name names. They're super insecure. They're rattled with insecurity. It comes from, I have to project this because I'm not 100% sure about it myself. And I'm not a psychologist here by any means. But that's the common denominator that I've seen. I do a lot of stuff in the surf industry. I do a lot of stuff in the skate, it's different industries. Outside of quarterbacking and another life that I have in marketing. And it's just true across the board. And you get into Hollywood and it's even more glaring. But I think it's rooted in insecurity. And so like the antithesis of the confidence that I'm talking about is insecurity. If you're really confident, if you have unwavering self-generated confidence, like you are completely secure in not only what you're doing, but who you are and who you're going to be if things good or bad happen. And, you see like, when you say like this quarterback is really confident, but he's cocky, usually it's, but he's cocky and not that good. It's just that's just what ends up happening. And the cockiness, I think, comes from the insecurity drives people to go, I have to project these things to tell everybody I believe this about myself, as opposed to like my brother is a perfect example. And I'm like drinking the Kool-Aid. I'm super biased. He's like my favorite athlete ever, right? You probably feel the same way about your brother. But my brother is one of those examples of giant superstar who's super, super, super confident. Now, nobody would know at the level that I do how confident he was as a player, but everyone would say the same thing, that he's super humble. So how can you be those two things? And it is that he believed these things about himself. He doesn't have to tell everybody that he believed them. He was completely secure enough in himself to go, you know what? I threw the pick, my bad. I'll own it, even though it's not his fault. Oh, reason we lost is me. Like, those guys can do that. Like, I think Joe Burrow can do that. Sam Darnold can do that. Josh Allen can do that. Patrick Mahomes can do that. A lot of these guys that I've been around a lot, like, they're secure in themselves enough to be able to say, I'll do that. Jared Goff goes, blame this year on me. Sure, do that. Because he's going to reload. He thinks he's going to win the Super Bowl next year. But he's secure enough to go, just blame me. It's fine.
Because he doesn't really believe that. So I'm a huge Joe Burrow fan. I absolutely fell in love with Joe Burrow this year. I think he is by far and away the best prospect in this draft, and the gap is not close for multiple reasons, and that's no diss to anybody else who's in the draft. I just think he's just better. But to me, I measure things like how you perform in the biggest moments, who are you getting these wins against, again, how you handle yourself when you get those wins, and just your overall playmaking ability. Like I'm a quarterback. I don't know, elitist, I guess you could say, or something. Like, I think you just have to have the guy. Like, if you don't have the guy, it's cute, and you can have a great team and a great organization and like a great standing in your community, but you're not going to win the game or have a dynasty if you don't have the guy. It's just all you can do. You can do good, not great.
100% agree with you.
So to me, Burrow is so obviously that guy. But what is it that what is the resistance with Burrow?
I guess give me an example of the resistance.
Okay, so I'll do that then. I'll be the negative Burrow person. So like the idea that he's only done this for a year, why is that not a problem?
So I look for patterns. In high school, he went to school in Athens, Ohio. It's a small school. That team had never won ever, and then they lost like in the championship or something like that, or the game before, like whatever. All of a sudden they won, and he's player of the year and all that stuff. You go, all right, but that's high school. Who cares? I think there's more to the Ohio State story. I think a lot of people really wanted Dwayne Haskins to start. That's not coming from him. That's coming from me looking at the entire situation. I believed that when it happened before I ever met Joe Burrow. And that's fine. He was the 15th pick in the draft last year. But it didn't not work for him at Ohio State. Like, he didn't play in a game and fail and they benched him, right? He just straight up didn't get an opportunity. So then when he did get an opportunity to go to LSU, he flipped a team and did something that had never been done before at that university, right? And really something that had never been done before, period. Okay, so he did it in high school. He did it in college. Does that mean he's automatically going to do it in the NFL? Of course not. But this is starting to look like a pattern. And so then you go, okay, well, how does that happen? And I think there's a couple of ways that you can flip around an organization. And trust me when I tell you, I've had this conversation with all kinds of guys, like the guy that just won the Super Bowl, like the dude who lost in the Super Bowl last year, like one of these guys are going to be in the Super Bowl in the next couple of years. What's happening in Buffalo? There's a couple of ways, there's like a process to turning around an organization. Now, obviously, you've got to have the right decision makers. You can't, there's elements outside of your control at play. But one, you've got to buy in. You have to be able to be the guy who says, hey, I'm involved in this. Two, you have to be able to be accountable to all of the things that you bought into, right? You can't, like, if you're going to talk about it, be about it. Same thing, right? You've got to be held accountable to those things. And then three, you've got to inspire other people to buy into what you've bought into. And in that, you have to elevate their play and demand that they consistently do that, which means you have to consistently do that. And Deshaun Watson did this at Clemson, and it was the first time they won a national championship. They always had first-round picks, right? They had a ton of first-round picks. Clemson's been putting dudes out, C.J. Spiller, right, dudes for years. But Deshaun flipped it for them, right? Barely lost his sophomore year, won it his junior year, and then they won it again after he left, right? And so that type of foundational change comes from, I think, those three elements. I've heard Dabo talk about it. And so you look at what happened in Buffalo, you look at what happened in Kansas City, and sure, talent is awesome. But if you have the ownership and all that stuff in place, if you can do those three things, now it's just about getting the right pieces around you. And I look at Joe and I go, he's shown a pattern of doing this. And from a confidence and maturity standpoint, I already talked about that. Like he's like, I've never really seen anybody like this before. And so I just say he's in position A to be able to do that. I don't care if he goes to the Bengals or the Dolphins or whatever team he goes to, he's going to be in a position to do it.
But he has all these great players around him. How good can he really be? Because LSU has all these, like the best offensive line and all these great receivers and Edwards-Helaire. So like, is he really that good or is it everyone around him?
In 2018, LSU led college football in dropped passes. Think about that. In 2019, they did a bunch of stuff that had never been done before, but it was all positive stuff on the other column, right? And so there was a lot of, it's pretty well documented, but the way that Joe worked with his guys, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson, these guys are 2- and 3-star guys out of high school. This is not Jerry Jeudy, Ruggs, the other dude, who were 5-star receivers. I'm at the Nike opening every year, the top 150 high school players in the country, and you can walk around there every single year and go, first round, like you can call it out, right? And all of those Bama receivers had been going to the draft, been going first round for a while. But LSU, those guys really turned around. Those guys were not the best receivers. They're coming into the draft as some of the best receivers, but that was not the case before they got there. So again, elevating the players around them. Clyde Edwards-Helaire was not a player that anyone was talking about last year. He was not even the starter the year before. He was too short or too whatever. And watch him go become Darren Sproles in the league. But it's elevating the players around you. And then from the offensive line's perspective, I don't think they have any linemen that are ranked really high in the draft. They were ranked really high as an offensive line. But the whole season, Ray ran basically from week 4 on, they were in 5-man protection, meaning they've only got 5 guys blocking, the 5 linemen. So they're getting 5 guys out in a route every time. You got 5 linemen, you got Joe, you got 5 other dudes. So that means every single time they're getting 5 guys out in the route, which puts pressure on the defense. But with only 5 guys to block, there's a lot of different looks that the defense can bring that could be problematic for LSU unless your quarterback can see it like an NFL guy, dial it up, slide this, borrow that guy, kick that guy over, get it out quick. So they just had all the answers. And I look at that and I go, that is completely transferable to the NFL. That's what makes Drew Brees and Tom Brady great. It's not that they run around, hurdle dudes, and whip it 60 yards across the field. No. They decipher information quickly and they get the ball out on time with accuracy.
But he's not that big and he doesn't have the strongest arm.
I think he's big enough. I think he's more athletic than everybody thinks. And I think that he's got an above average arm in terms of the top guys in the NFL. The arm strength thing is just the most over scrutinized element. I think if we list the top 10 quarterbacks all time, and then we could somehow put a list together of arm strength all time, it would average out. They'd just be right in the middle of the pack. Now, it's easy to say right now because Mahomes is the best in the league and Aaron has been the best in the league, and those guys have absolute howitzers. But Tom Brady doesn't, Drew Brees doesn't, Phillip Rivers doesn't, Eli and Peyton certainly didn't. There's just all these all-time greats. Romo was like a slightly above average. There's just a bunch of dudes who, they're above average, they look good, but it's about throwing the ball with anticipation, timing, and accuracy. And if you can do those things, but you can't throw one as hard as the guys with the big arms, then it doesn't really matter. Mahomes is just super sexy because he does all of it. But I don't know that that's the new norm.
By the way, I don't believe any of those things. I'm just quoting people that are critical of Burrow. Okay, but the one thing that does concern me about being wrong about Joe is that he will probably end up going to Cincinnati. And I don't take that organization very seriously as contenders, which I don't think they've given us a lot of evidence that they are an organization that's run very well. I mean, Marvin Lewis had a great run there. I don't think he gets enough credit for what he was able to do with that organization. But they've been dysfunctional over the years. I mean, they have the number 1 overall pick in the draft for a reason. So that's a lot even for the guy to overcome. And unlike situations like Boomer Esiason kind of compared Burrow to LeBron this week, and it's like, to me, the NBA comparison to the NFL is it's too extreme. There's way too many extra factors. You can have an unbelievable player go to an organization that doesn't know what they're doing, and that's their career, especially early on with quarterbacks. Can he overcome, or can he turn around an organization like Cincinnati?
I don't know. I played there for 3 years. Probably know as much about that organization as probably anybody. But to me, the NFL, and the way that I explain this to people is like, did you watch Game of Thrones?
Yes.
Okay, so Game of Thrones, right? Bunch of seasons, bunch of people died, bunch of people wore crowns, all this stuff. The whole thing came down to 2 women. Came down to 2 people.
Right.
It was Cersei and it was Daenerys. Like, when it was all said and done, there's a bunch of amazing characters on there, but what really mattered was those 2 characters, right? And I think the way that the NFL works is there's a handful of ownership groups. And it's the ones who've won most of the Super Bowls recently. It's Bob Kraft, it's Pittsburgh, it's the Giants, right? It's these classic ownership groups, and they kind of are always going to get an at-bat, or it's going to come down to, one of those teams. I throw Seattle in there of late, right?
Right.
And so, in my opinion, you're either in that group or you're not in that group. And there's certainly people knocking on the door, right, that are almost there ready for their first one. I would say Kansas City, right? They just won it for the first time in 50 years. So 12 months ago, I would have said they're knocking on the door. They're about to get one in the next few. They got one, so now they're in that group. So the Bengals have not won one. So they've been to one a long time ago. So they're not in that group. So the way I look at it is, how do you get in that group? And you made the comment earlier. This whole thing comes down to, do you have a dude or not? So once you have a dude, you're now, in my opinion, you're knocking on the door. Okay. Now what you have to have is great direction and the ability to build around that dude. So it's not just O-line and receivers, it's all of it. How does the quarterback room? Who are you putting in the room with him? Who is giving him the majority of his information? Is it coming from the coordinator? Is it coming from the quarterback coach? In Cincinnati, I don't know, Zach Taylor's a quarterback guy. Maybe it's the head coach, right? Who is blocking for him? Who's the O-line coach? What's he doing around that guy? From a defensive standpoint, one of the best things you can do for a quarterback's psyche is create turnovers and get sacks on third down. So pass rush, that's got to be a huge emphasis on the draft. In the draft and free agency is pass rush. And then all the other pieces around it are kind of ancillary pieces, but you have to start to build around that guy. And so for me to say Cincinnati, he can't do it in Cincinnati, I don't know. They haven't taken anybody number 1 since they took my brother in 2003. And it's been a minute, and they had a couple good runs too. For me to compare, I played for Marvin Lewis. It's a completely different franchise now. I mean, Marvin was so involved in everything. I don't know how they do it with Zach. It might be worse. It might be better. I don't know. But I know this: if they have Joe, they've got that first piece. They're knocking on the door because they got a dude. Now they got to put the pieces. And just look around the league. So look at Patrick. Look at who they got at wideout. Look at what they've spent at O-line and tight end. And then what do they do address in the draft? They get Tyrann Mathieu as a safety in the back end who's a difference maker, and then pass rush, right? Look at Baltimore. Those are the perfect tight ends and receivers to play with Lamar. Guys who came from spread offenses with fast quarterbacks who moved down the field. Guys, two of the, Hollywood Brown, Mark Andrews from Oklahoma, who played with Kyler and Baker, right? So you just look at these pieces and it all makes sense to build around the dude. So Baltimore, knocking. Kansas City, been knocking, won last year, right? So Cincinnati, can they turn that around? I think that if they take Joe, they can absolutely build around him. Buffalo, another one, knocking. They got the dude, they're adding the pieces, they're knocking.
I'm holding out hope that the Dolphins give them like 5 first-round picks or something and move up and get him. I just think it'd be a better situation for him. But he's probably going to end up in Cincinnati. All right. So really quickly, I want to ask you about a couple other guys. Obviously, the other guy in the conversation is Tua. Now you haven't worked directly with Tua, right?
I have, yeah. I didn't start him for the draft, but I've known him since freshman year in high school is when I met him.
Oh, wow, okay.
As a freshman.
So I like Tua, but I don't love him for a couple of different reasons. One, I mean, maybe it's the wrong mentality and I need to get rid of it, but he did play at Alabama, which is like held against Joe that he played with these great players, but it's not held against Tua that he played with probably better players or more highly ranked players, at least when they went into Alabama. But the most important thing that gives me pause is the injuries. I don't love the injuries. I think availability is a skill, and it doesn't matter how talented you are. If you're not out there, you're not contributing, and at that position, it's just a huge liability. Now, that said, if he's available and you need a quarterback, you have to take Tua. I can't envision you passing on Tua, even for someone like Justin Herbert, who may not have the health situation, but I have other questions about. Am I wrong for having those reservations?
No, I think it makes sense. So I 100% agree. Availability is the most important ability, more so than running ability or ability to read a defense or ability to lead a locker room. Availability is the most important, for sure. And I agree. I think it's a skill. Look, these guys get older. Quarterback becomes 12-month deal. My brother, for example, I think he averaged like over 1 surgery a year. Something. Season ends, like you're operating on something, you're rehabbing something. You don't wait. You don't give yourself a month off and then do that. You do it immediately. You get right into it. And it's just 12 months over and over and over again. I certainly do not think with Tua that is a toughness issue at all, right? It is strictly like bad luck or some areas of his body that need to be addressed. Toughness-wise, Tua is as tough as they come. But yeah, I think it's a real concern. It's a concern with all these guys. Albert Breer had an interesting stat that I saw, and he named 7 first-round pick quarterbacks who had a major injury in college and had the exact same major injury in the NFL. It was an interesting stat. It was Sam Bradford, it was RG3, Deshaun Watson, Carson Wentz. I'm drawing a blank on a couple of the other ones. That to me is interesting. It doesn't mean Tua is going to get hurt. The bigger question for me is, what's the plan for Tua? Okay, Tua from a talent perspective can totally play week 1. Like run around, throw the ball. Yeah, he's amazing. But quarterbacks, and I've said this a lot, quarterbacks get really good at the things that they have to do to survive. So if you can run around and make plays, and you got to do that to survive, you're going to do that. Peyton Manning was so good pre-snap at the end of his career and was so incapable of moving that he did so much pre-snap to get it in the perfect play because that's what he had to do to survive, right? And so if Tua has no offseason, if he has to play early, okay, with no offseason, assuming they guys just show up for training camp and then go play, and which means he's not going to necessarily know the offense to that extent that he would have if he had an offseason, and he's not going to understand the coverages and the protections that he would have if he had an offseason. It's not about how smart you are. It's just like a lot less hours of practice.
Right.
That's the case, and he goes in there, and he gets drafted high, which means he's on probably a lesser team. And if he has to play early, he's going to run around. He's not necessarily going to see it as quickly. Deshaun did this his rookie year too. He's going to run around more. He's going to try and make more plays because he's capable. He's really, really good at that stuff. And if that happens, you open yourself up to injuries more often. And so I just look at it and I go, well, shoot, what's the plan for Tua? Because here's the other side. If a team like New England, if a team like New Orleans, if one of these teams who has a really established veteran starter, I think the Chargers, look, I love Tyrod Taylor. I think the dude in a good situation can play, right? I don't know that I use that high of a pick when I got Tyrod on the road. I want to put him on the field and see if he can play first. But even a place like that, if you can for sure put Tua on the bench for a year and give him that whole year of sitting and watching and learning, and I think all these guys would be great sitting every year. But with Tua, if that's the plan, then I go, all right, that's a full 2 years of rehab to really strengthen that thing, really slow the game down, and let the athleticism just be something that he uses on an as-needed basis as opposed to on a only way to get a first down basis. Then I think you can take Tua really high and that he can be your guy.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think I almost said San Diego. I think the Chargers are the best situation for him. I like Tyrod a lot too. I think Tyrod could be your starter for 2 or 3 years, actually. He's not a guy you're going to build the entire franchise around for the next 10, 15 years. Tua would be that guy, but I would love the idea of Tua sitting behind someone like Tyrod, learning from him, a professional, a great player at that, who's probably just not had the opportunity to just go do that and have his team. I think that's the perfect situation for him. I think if he goes to Miami, he's going to be under a little more pressure because, Miami's been starving for that guy where the Chargers haven't. They've had Phillip Rivers for the last 17 years. Miami hasn't. And Fitzpatrick is Fitzpatrick, but he's been playing for like 300 years. Like it's Ryan Fitzpatrick. Like, love the guy, but like you're not building your franchise around him. There's going to be more pressure for Tua to get in right away. I think it's crucial where Tua ends up going for sure.
Yeah. So then any player that we've talked about in the first round who is legit, like in the last couple of years.
Yeah. I think for quarterbacks, especially like where you go matters. Yeah.
What's that?
I think for quarterbacks, it's so important, like your first 2 to 3 years of development, who you're learning from, like you said, what the system is, whether you're pressured to be out there right away. Are you having turnover at coordinator or head coach? Like, even Baker Mayfield, like I like Baker a lot. I loved his accuracy most of all coming out of college. There's some personality things there that I'd probably tweak, but I feel bad for him. Like, how can you get ahead every year? You've got a new coach. Halfway through the year, you've got a new coach and a new coordinator. Like, that's so much change. Anyone in any business would lose their mind. Totally.
Bortles had 4 coordinators in 4 years. Alex Smith, I think, had like 6 in his first 7 years in San Fran. Yeah, it's crazy. And so that's why it's like, it's not the offensive coordinator's fault. Those guys, that just means they got fired. It's the owner. It's the ownership group. What are you doing around this guy? And I think 2 things. If you find a quarterback and he can be your guy, 1, you cannot take him too high. There's no such thing. Right. And 2, he cannot sit for too long. There's no such thing. If you have a guy, if Tua can be your guy, and he is like, if you're the Chargers and he can be your franchise quarterback, if you can just replace him with what you just had, which is every year you have a chance to win a Super Bowl with Phillip Rivers. He's going to play at a high enough level, right? If you can replace him with that, then sitting him for 1 year or 2 years, if you're going to get that, look at Aaron. You can't sit him long enough and you can't take him high enough. 1 is not too high. So many people think, well, I gotta, if you're going to take somebody at 4, he has to play this year. Like, really? That just means that the GM doesn't have 3 or 4 years on his contract. That just means that there's not enough job security. Because why? If he's going to be your guy who's going to check that box for you and you don't have to draft a quarterback for a long time, first comment you made, if you have a guy, you have a chance. You can't take him too high. You can't sit long enough.
Well, I think for everyone except for like the number 1 or number 2 overall pick, I subscribe to that. Like Baker being the number 1 overall pick, because that's kind of what Hugh Jackson tried to do in Cleveland. He had Tyrod and he wanted to start Tyrod. He did start Tyrod and had Baker, and the idea was that he was going to sit. And obviously we know what happened there, and it all fell apart after that. But I think if you're the number 1 overall pick, just for political purposes, the fans, like the hype, it's almost impossible for you to not come in right away and be starting. For guys like Tua or Justin Herbert or Jacob Eason or Jordan Love, like that's obviously a different conversation. I think if you go number 1 overall, like Joe Burrow, like he's got to start day 1, regardless of everything that's happening.
Media marketing, agree, but it just depends on who are you drafting and what is your plan. Burrow can play right away. there's no case of injuries. Different. His style is
but
different.
He's the number 1 overall pick also.
Yeah, he is. But if he went 3rd overall, I'd say he can play 2. If Tua didn't get hurt, and let's say Tua was going to go number 1, and I'd still say it's the same plan. He ran 3 different systems at Alabama. Here's the big difference too. And when you mentioned it, you kind of blew past it when you said that for some reason it's a knock that he played at Alabama.
Yeah.
Here's because I agree, and here's what I would say is the reason for that. When you're in the NFL, I played on teams that went to the playoffs, and I've been on like 2-14 teams, And one of the things is every single Sunday, even when I played in Jacksonville and we were terrible, I played on a really bad Tennessee Titans team one year. Like every week we thought we were going to win. Like we got a bunch of dogs in the room. Like we're not sitting here going, oh, we got the Patriots, we're going to get killed. No, in the NFL, every week, hey, this is what we're going to do. We got a chance we're going to beat these guys, right? That's not the case in college football. I played at UTEP. When we played Texas Tech, when we played Arizona State, these bigger schools, I had a bunch of guys on my team who would have gone there had they got an offer from there. So before the game started, like, we're playing a better team, we're going to win. Like, when Norfolk State plays Clemson, it doesn't matter about the weather, about who's playing, about what the game plan is. Norfolk State is not going to beat Clemson.
Right.
It's just not going to happen. Nobody on Norfolk State thinks they're going to win, and nobody on Clemson thinks they're going to lose. So when you're Bama, there's only one, maybe 0, 1, or 2 times a year when every single person on your sideline isn't absolutely convinced that you are going to thunder punch this other team. Fair?
Fair.
So I look at the games that Tua started. I would say there's probably only one game in his career where it was 50-50 at best in terms of either way. This game could go either way, man. These dudes are probably just as good as us. And they got the brakes beaten off of them by Clemson in that national championship game. The difference is, how do you play when you're going into a game and you go, these other guys are way better than us? I don't know. If you haven't done that so he was on an amazing team in high school. And when you play at Bama, everybody on your team, think about it. It's not like I think I can, the little engine that could. It is a fundamental belief that, like, it doesn't even matter if we start off down. We're gonna crush these dudes. That's not how the NFL works.
Right.
Yeah, everyone thinks they can win, but you don't definitively know that. And so that confidence has to come from the quarterback. And if the first time you've ever had to generate that confidence for somebody else is in the league, that's a hard thing to do. It's doable, but that's a hard thing to do.
Yeah, that's true. It's a completely different world when it comes to that. But I always say that. That's why I always think that the idea of tanking is nonsense. Like, players don't tank. Nobody cares about that tanking nonsense if you're a player. Jordan, thank you so much. I know you're a super busy guy. I could talk to you about this for like the next 3 hours, but I have like 500 other questions, so maybe we'll do it another time.
Again, yeah, it's super fun. I'm such a fan of you and Colin as well. And so this is a great conversation. I love it. Let's do it again.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Stay safe, and excited to see what you do with QBsummit.com. Make sure you check that out. And can anyone follow you anywhere else, or you want to?
Yeah, the easiest way to follow me is on Instagram right now. Just my name, Joran Palmer. Twitter, I don't do a good enough job on there, but yeah, I'm in the process as we go through this coronavirus of moving everything to QBsummit.com. So kids and players and actually parents too. I'm creating an amazing resource for players to learn more about the position and be able to essentially, through videos that I shoot with NFL guys, college guys, coaches, every resource I have available to me. This is going to be a one-stop shop for quarterbacks actually all over the world to be able to advance their game. And then the parents too, for them to learn from the best dads, learn from the best moms. It's going to be an incredible ecosystem we're looking to launch by the end of May.
Awesome. Well, congratulations on your continued success. Stay safe, and I'll talk to you again soon.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.